Welcome to the Sound on Sound People and Music Industry podcast channel with me, Kevin Paul. In this special episode, we bring you a live recording from the GearFest festival in 2025. On the panel, we had Tim Bran, Danton Supple, Julian Kindred and Shelby Logan Warren. We talk about how we got into the music industry and the studio business, what it's like to be an assistant and many other things. We hope you get some joy from it, and thank you very much for listening. First of all, I'm just going to go along and ask everyone just to introduce themselves very briefly, and then we'll go from there. Like I say, my name's Kevin Paul.
My name's Tim Bran.
I'm Danton Supple.
I'm Shelby Logan Warren.
And I'm Julian Kindred.
When we all decided to want to work in the studio, there was probably there's many ways that you can do that, right? There's many ways that you can go and work in the studio. They've changed a lot since I started, but really what I would like to know from the panel is, what were your ideas of how easy or difficult that would be when you initially said, yeah, you know what, I think I want to have a career in the studio? Tim, how did that work out for you?
I grew up in Guernsey in the Channel Islands, and it was occupied during the war, and there's lots of German bunkers over there. And I found one, and there's not many things you can use a German bunker for. You can either store wine in it, or my idea was to put a studio in it. And it's underground. It was a communications bunker. So it was £40 a month, I think, to rent, because storing wine would be about £40 a month. So I went in and said, I want to make this into a studio. It had been used as a studio before. A guy called Barry Gray had it, who did all the Thunderbirds themes and all that stuff. So there was weird old gear down there. So I was in bands at the time, as most of us probably have been involved in other parts of the music industry. And I was always the one in the band that wanted to record the band. So I first of all, I had a kind of 4-track Porter studio set up, which I'd just use in my bedroom, and decided I needed a space, whatever space that is. I think, find a space that you can record either the band you're in or other artists. And so I went in and made my own studio. And I think that kind of applies these days with everyone's got a laptop. That is your studio. So where do you want to set up and record? And, whether it's your bedroom or, find a collaboration space somewhere. I think that was my first entry. So I had my own studio. Then I discovered people would pay me to record them. So it was a win-win. I was experimenting all these ideas on these other bands, and it was everything from doing voiceovers from TV to heavy metal bands. Literally was right across the board. So I kind of learned a lot of genres and applied the same techniques to all of them, just learned my craft, really. So there was no real formal training for you in terms of, because a lot of us started out in maybe smaller studios, or if we were lucky we got into a big studio. Yeah, that would be like I did after that.
Yeah. So initially, though,
initially I just studied. I was lucky enough to meet a producer called Laurie Latham, who produced a lot of bands, Paul Young and the Christians and bands like that during the Blockheads back in the day. And they were recording in Guernsey. I think Paul Young came over and Christians came over, and they had a little studio set up in a house. And he, don't know why, but he let me kind of hang out and just literally watch silently in the corner, and kind of learnt a lot off him. And I'd literally go back to my own studio, because in those days it was the end of tape. So he was like recording backing vocals onto 1/4 inch, marking the beat before, and then hitting them and flying them into the next chorus. Yeah. Probably most of the people, some of the people in this room might understand all that, but it's like you literally mark a beat before and hit play, and you could then, the old copy and paste, I guess, fly them into the next chorus. And then so I'd literally go back and try that on the heavy metal band who I was working with at the time, and just kind of formulated that. It was before YouTube and all that, so I had to just experiment, listening to records as well, like really listening to records and going, how did they make that sound, and working it out, probably not with the same instruments, but trying to figure out how they did that reverb. A lot of Trevor Horn stuff, actually, I know you worked with. He was one of my go-tos for great production ideas.
Well, maybe we'll ask Danton.
Natural lead on.
Come on.
Yeah. Set you up.
Well, how did it all go? How did it all start?
For me, it was a complete tangential jump into music. I had no plans to do music production whatsoever. And then after sixth form, I had an introduction to it by going into a studio which belonged to a girlfriend's uncle. And all of a sudden, there was technology, music, the sort of late nights, a certain creative lifestyle. And that all appealed. So I then tried to figure out how you get into here. And because I've been planning to go down a more academic route, the only thing I could find was Tonmeister. But for Tonmeister, you needed to be a grade 8 musician. I had the maths and physics, but I didn't have even though I was in bands, there wasn't a classic player. And so I just tried to look around and see how do you get into this. I realized it was a progression system back then. You come into a studio as a runner or a receptionist. They're all pretty insistent on that in the day, and work your way up.
Can you explain that a little bit for maybe some of the younger people?
Come to it straight in a moment, because I found a list of London studios. Sadly, there were loads then, all big studios which had multiple rooms and a whole employed staff group and hierarchy, which you could work your way through. So I wrote to every single studio, got rejected by every single studio, and then I sort of realised that it doesn't matter where you go into, as long as you get in somewhere, it's much easier to move around laterally afterwards. So I found a job in a jazz studio in Hoxton Square. This is when Hoxton Square was far from desirable, as it is now. So I got into that, and then another studio, Strong Room, was just being built around the corner. And Dave Formula from a band called Magazine, who I was a big fan of, came into work in Wave, liked the effort, whatever I was doing there, and invited me back to Strong Room. And then in my first year at Strong Room, an engineer-producer from Psalm Studios, Trevor Horn's place, said, you're working really hard, you've got a good headspace on why you want to be here, you should come and work for us. But then going to Psalm, I had to go into this system of going into night reception. No matter where you came from in your previous life at Psalm, you had to start at night reception. So when I was on night reception, one of the other guys had been a mining manager in South Africa, and the other one had been an officer in the Merchant Navy, but both wanted to get into music, and they had to go through the same route. But it was a bit of a lottery, because when you went on night reception, it was like sort of dead man's shoes. You could only move on when someone else came out. So I didn't have too much of a bad time. I did about 3 months, and it was in the summertime, so it was great. Work all night, sleep in the sun all day. And it wasn't like you kind of launched into the world of engineering after that. You went from night reception into the tape store and general runner, and then up into assisting. But
how long did that take?
It took me about 6 months, I think, before. I think there'd been a few departures, and I was lucky in many ways to then end up working for Trevor and Steve Lipson, as well as a lot of other people that came through the studio on a freelance basis. But that was kind of the way most people I knew got into studios.
Yeah, sure.
I'd realised I hadn't thought about production at all as a child. But once I started doing it, friends were like, yeah, you're always obsessing about hi-fi, and you'd buy records, which everyone would say, why do you want that record? And they'd be like, no, I hate the music, but it sounds amazing, this particular song. So I must have had some interest in production without knowing what production was
of course,
at that point. And the other great thing about Psalm in those days, there was a huge amount of money in the industry. The amazing producers from all over the world were coming into the studio. So you were sitting constantly behind, and it was just up to you to look and learn. And you're very lucky to learn off a lot of great people. So
cool.
That was the journey.
Yeah, initially.
And then after that, the next stage, I guess, is going freelance. I didn't actually want to become an engineer for quite a while, because I realised once you started engineering, you stopped assisting other people. So your learning curve plateaued slightly.
Yeah. Well, we'll come to that.
And I was working with so many amazing people. I wanted to do that a bit longer.
Yeah.
And I think, in hindsight, it was a good idea, because even now you'd be doing something, and I think, where did I learn? Or someone would ask you, where did you learn to do that? And I have to think, I have no idea, but it was probably someone in that crowd over those years. And then I did become like a house engineer at West Side Studios.
Yeah. And
then a producer, Steve Lillywhite, was working there and asked me if I wanted to go freelance. And so I took that bold jump into being freelance then.
We'll come to the future after we sort of go down the line here. Shelby, tell us your little story as to how you're here today.
So first and foremost, I'm a musician, and I feel like I kind of got into this whole industry originally as a means to an end, to try and get myself to, record myself in a pro way with enough knowledge to do it, quote unquote, properly. And then I kind of accidentally realized how much I enjoyed producing and recording and getting into the tech. And, I grew up surrounded by electronics and tech, because my dad is an electronics engineer. But he also introduced me to the whole world of Trevor Horn and all the stuff that ZTT was doing. So I grew up on the likes of Frankie Goes to Hollywood and Propaganda and Seal. But then he's also big into his prog as well. So I also listen to a lot of Genesis. And, you know, combine that, I kind of just like had this desire to get into engineering. And one day found myself being like, you know what? I think I can do this. And with that sense of arrogance and hubris, I very quickly realized that I couldn't. But I still tried anyways, and somehow managed to land an intern job at Old Street Studios over in Hoxton. And for some reason, I have this weird sense of tenacity and drive where I just won't stop until I just keep getting to that next level up. So I was an intern, then I was an assistant, then I was an engineer, then I was the chief engineer there, and then next thing I know, I'm managing the place. Left in 2023, wanted to do more, wanted to own my own studio. One thing led to another. A friend of mine says, well, rather than building somewhere from scratch, why don't you take over an existing studio, buy out a business? So I did exactly that. So as of last April, myself and my partner Grace, we took over Sensible Music, which is the next street over from here, on Brewery
just
Road.
down the road, isn't it?
And it's a large 8-studio complex, and it's very cool. You should all come down at some point. But yeah, I stayed persistent. I kept on hounding people, and I was being that voice that was just annoying in the corner always, and just kept pushing.
Thank
here
you.
I am.
Julian.
My foray into all this was similar to all of these stories to some degree, but different in as much as I come from a part of Canada which is very cut off from any kind of a regular infrastructure of music opportunity. You had the sense enough as a young man to know that, to realize that. But I was very determined about wanting to get into record production. I didn't know how. I didn't know where to begin. There wasn't really any opportunities where I was from. One individual had a 2-inch tape machine and a deck and was hiring a desk and was hiring people to come in and play. My father being one of the guitar players who would do sessions. But anyway, listening to records with my father as a kid, I was very determined to find a way to, while confident about my musical ability as a keyboard player, I wasn't really interested in performing live or being on stage. I knew I wanted to get into studio. And very similar to the way everybody here is described. But I had to figure out a way to get someplace where there was heavy traffic. So a friend of a friend who knew another friend who one of those things, I got an opportunity to be in a function band, which then allowed me the opportunity to be in the United States. So I was in Nashville suddenly, and over an initial really heavy period of time of writing charts and everything for this function band, would do numerous business, entertainment things and stuff, lots of Beatles and Motown, and the occasional Beach Boys thing. But organizing all this and everything, I had enough time on my hands to knock on doors in Nashville on Music Row. And I just was desperate to get in. I wasn't confident enough to present myself as a musician. I know now that I was reasonably all right enough to be a musician and enter in that way, but I decided I'm going to learn something else that gets me in the door, and I decided that would be engineering. So I took the opportunity to knock on doors and was rejected for an entire year. Everybody said no. Finally, there was this one studio which was it dealt with the demos for publishing companies. And I thought it was going to be a very, shall we say, C-rate gig, But what I quickly discovered, they let me in the door, and I was supposed to clean the toilets and clean the studio, and I didn't think I was going to be anywhere near entering the main room. Until 2 weeks later, the main engineer yelled at me. My name was Hey for about a month. Hey! So I went into the control room, and after 2 weeks, I got a lucky break. I was not out of the control room for 3 years. So it was a really, really great moment of fortune. But what I was suddenly confronted with was that all the musicians that did the sessions for these publishing dates were the A-list players who weren't doing A-list dates. And so, I mean, we'll go on and take too much time now for me to mention the people I was suddenly working with, but it was mental, you know? So Reggie Young has played guitar on like Dusty in Memphis, right? It was insane. It just went on and on and on. We don't have the time for it here, but so suddenly I was in this situation where I was like, okay, be on time, be here whenever we call you and everything. You know, I lived an hour outside of town, no car, skint, completely, you know, and so I made a deal with the engineer who referred to me as Hey. That, look, if I crash here at the studio and promise I arrive clean and in the morning and everything, can I stay up and work with the Christmas? He said, knock yourself out, fill your boots, do whatever you want, you know? So a really cool studio. It was one of those sort of RCA-B studio type checkerboard tile floor type vibes, right? The desk was a Trident 90. Does anybody know that one? They were Trident was trying to go beyond the 80. Anyway, but still, signal flow was there. Everything was there enough to teach me and everything. So I had to work all night, you know. And I just had to make sure that I was there the next morning, fresh, even though I only slept 1 hour. But that was my beginning. That was the opportunity that I just, you know, seized to turn into something substantial. So
thank you. I've forgotten to tell you my short journey. My journey started by looking at records and records that I loved, and seeing the credits on the records, and the credits said sound engineer, recorded by producer, and I had no idea what those terms meant. But eventually I found out, and I thought, sound engineer, that sounds like something I could do, because I loved plugging stuff up. And like Danton said, I got a list of recording studios from the APRS, which was like the governing body for recording studios at the time. And I went through all of them, all the ones in London, writing letters or phoning up or paying visits, until I got to one called S, which was for Soho Studios. Now, Soho Studios was not a glamorous studio. It was far from it. We had maybe one session that paid for the studio time in 6 months. But what it did allow me to do was to learn how a studio worked. I could learn signal flow. I could learn how a desk worked, a patch bay worked. I could learn how a sampler and a computer synchronized together. And essentially that information allowed me to get my next job, which was in a much bigger commercial studio called Conch Studios. And, you know, that was the beginning of my journey. If it wasn't for those 6 months, I wouldn't have got a job at a commercial studio, because I knew nothing, you know. And Danton mentioned something about Tonemeister courses. Well, at the time, there was one course in the UK where you could learn sound engineering, and it was the Tonemeister course, and it was for the best 10 musicians in the country. Not engineers or anything, musicians. Like Danton said, you had to be like, you know, grade 8 and above. And I realised, listening to everyone here, how there's a lot of variety in how people have come to get into a studio. But there's also a lot of similarities. And I think one of the biggest similarities is the determination to want to be in a studio. You know, I think we appreciate nowadays that it's a very different system. There's not so many studios as there was for a start. Everyone's got a studio in their laptop anyway. And a lot of people attend colleges or universities or colleges online to learn what they believe is sound engineering and production. What's interesting is that when you step into a studio environment, well, let's ask the guys here, how different is it from that environment of being in a university and then coming into a commercial environment? What's the kind of differences there?
I don't know if they teach you any of the social things, because the first thing that jumps to mind for me is, you know, being in a studio is a very fragile environment, especially if you're assisting or whatever job you're doing. I think you've got to realise, if you are in, you know, even literally if you're making the tea, you're as important in that environment as the producer and the artist. You could say one wrong thing. I've had it on a session where the assistant has said, oh, this sounds like Radiohead. And then the band don't like Radiohead. I mean, I've literally had that. And it's like, oh, so we're doing the wrong thing. You know, one comment can break a whole...
And the lead singer of the band is mad at the producer because the producer just said, that's too much like Radiohead.
Yeah, exactly. So you are as important in this. So I think realising your role in a room, which is the same as general life anyway, realising your role. And I mean, I had a kid in my studio a couple of weeks ago, a friend of a friend who's 15, and no offence, but don't speak in the we were writing as well, so it was an even more delicate thing when we started with nothing, you know. And he was great for a couple of days. And you know, if we chat to you and you know ask you stuff or what you think of it, then tell us what you think. And but that's on that opportunity. So I think, know your role in every room you're in, and that'll change. Obviously, we all do various things each day. You might be only writing, you might be producing, you might be engineering. I think know your role in those environments.
I think as Danton said, he had a chain of progression. When you guys got to certain places, what did you initially think of? Did you think it was as easy as you thought it would be, or did you think, this is really hard?
I think the journey's got quite blurred edges between each of those points: assisting, running, engineering, producing. And one of the things that really makes people stand out is if they understand the delineation there and they can work within it, because it will change that point quite often depending on the project you're on. If you're employed as an engineer on this one and there's a producer, then there's a remit which you have to stick within, and the same with an assistant. And seeing people who lasted, because when we're talking about having a character to be comfortable in a room, we're not talking about office hours, we're talking about studio hours. It's 14-hour days, 6 days a week quite often on certain projects, and that would filter out certain people, just having to deal with the hours themselves, but also dealing with those hours and still remaining, you know, happy and doing what you had to do and getting along with things. One of the things which took a little while, as we moved into a phase where there was fewer and fewer studios, but more and more courses offering training in this world, it was kind of quite difficult. It was bad enough as it was, but then the amount of applications we had coming to the studios kind of started going through the roof. And when we were interviewing then, or when you have people in, either as a personal assistant for me or with the studio, you're almost not as interested in their CV as you are in how is this person in this room? Can they deal? Are they a people person? Can they communicate? Do they know when it's time to be quiet, when it's not?
Speaking of that, Shelby, you obviously employ people.
Yes.
How do you approach the person coming? You know, maybe there's many people here that want.
Well, that's the thing. I can see it from both sides of the fence now.
Yeah.
I mean, I know from my personal experience when I was getting into this world, I had to be just annoying enough to make sure that the previous studio that I worked at didn't forget about me. So I was able to, you know, be called in for sessions. Because I think there's a lot of consistency in... There's a lot of people in this industry that are very just tunnel vision focused on stuff, so we'll forget object permanence, but with people. Because everyone is so laser focused on their role, their task, that if you don't kind of nudge someone and remind them that you exist, they will forget about you. And I had to be just annoying enough to keep persisting, so I would be able to, you know, just be there, sitting in on sessions, and then eventually doing sessions. But then on the other side of the fence, finding someone that has that level of persistence whilst also not being too persistent is such a delicate fine line. And, you know, there's a lot of passion and just drive and energy in this industry, but there can also be the wrong type of passion and drive. And all it takes is for someone to just, I mean, it's like you say, all it takes is for someone to say the wrong thing once and wouldn't want them back.
Well, I'm sure you've had that in interviews,
Song
right?
with Trevor used to have such a high turnover, and it wasn't just for the wrong word, it was for a number of singular wrong things.
Back when I was working at Old Street, there was, when I got to the management level, we took on an intern. I'm not going to name any names, obviously, but he was very enthusiastic, and he would be very chatty with the clients. And sometimes this was a good thing, but most of the time it was very, very distracting. And, you know, when we're trying to get on with the job, it's kind of not really appropriate to be talking about certain things and be very, you know... But for me, the thing that really knocked it over was there was a sense of overconfidence. And so I asked him one day to set up a kit for a client, mic it up, because he insisted that he could do that. He knew exactly what he needed to do. So I was like, okay, go and do it. And came back through to the control room and said, Shelby, all done. Do you want to come take a look? And I was horrified. I mean, the toms were like almost vertical facing and like that far apart. And like for some reason, all of the mic stands were like, they're all boom stands, but the actual like column was way over here. And obviously everything was beginning to sag. And I was like, is he joking? Is this a joke? But no, he was being serious. And in that moment, I was like, yeah, I can't have this guy on sessions anymore. This is just embarrassing. I had to quickly reset up the kit, re-mic it with the client arriving in about 20 minutes. So,
what I've really noticed about the last talking discussion points is that we all spoke about him. We didn't mention her at all. And now, obviously, studios are full of women, and rightfully so. And personally, I think they really help the studio environment. You know, prior to women becoming employed on a regular basis in studios, it was a high testosterone-filled environment where men would run wild. And genuinely, genuinely, you know,
especially if you make those residential sessions where you're putting that big boiling pot of testosterone into a country house
with alcohol,
with a big budget, and leaving them for 2 months.
With alcohol and God knows what else. I mean, it was just like chaos. How do we? Well, you spoke earlier about RAC and
RAC,
nearly all the studios.
Yeah, well,
you've got a studio at RAC.
Well, the thing with RAC is it's now a majority of women engineers. And for myself, for the last 10 years, I've normally employed female assistants.
Yeah.
I know this is a different bias, but it needed to happen.
Yes.
Because it was so out of place. My mother, who was a big pusher of executive positions for women in publishing, back in, not in music publishing, in written publishing, visited me at Psalm Studios in 1988 and was absolutely horrified.
Yeah.
She was like, where are all the women? And I was like, and the thing is, a lot of that glass ceiling wasn't from blokes necessarily. It was a mindset at the time, because there were female studio managers. Because I had asked, why don't we ever have any women working here as assistants? It's like, oh, it'll be late at night, they'll be getting cabs on their own, not sure we can put them in a studio with all these guys. It's like, they've done okay outside for the rest of their lives, why not? Yeah. And now that would seem a bizarre thing to say, because it seems so normal now to have a very mixed environment.
Yeah.
And also, as people are coming on, the years are going past, the, say, upper echelons, the kind of the people we know and we read about and we hear about is becoming far more mixed now.
Yeah.
Which is, it's taken way too long, but I'm glad it's somewhere there now.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you guys have obviously started your careers. Was that the reality that you expected? Like, did your journey as you initially started in the studio, was that kind of exactly how you thought it would be, or?
Not at all.
Okay, so why not?
I didn't think I'd end up in a position where I'd be owning a recording studio.
Why did you decide to own a recording studio?
Foolishness, but also I don't know. I guess I just chase risk. As an interesting FYI, when I was applying for studios to work at back in 2018, applied for a whole load of studios, must have been about 50 or 60 all across London, and one of them was Sensible Music. So going from applying for a job there to then now owning it feels like a very full circle cathartic moment. But
so your journey is quite short, isn't it? Really?
I guess it is. Yeah.
Like if you started in
2018, he'd still been on reception.
He would, yeah. He would still be. I would still be knocking on doors, like genuinely.
I'd be in my bunker.
Yeah. And Julian's like not even here. He's in America.
Yeah.
He's in Nashville. No,
I don't know. I kind of, I suppose I just luck, right place, right time, tenacity. I don't know.
Tenacity, yeah.
I just, I always made an effort outside of the studio to come to things like this and meet people and network.
You're a very good networker.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Julian.
you
I mean,
are,
coming from you especially, that means a lot, because I feel
Hey,
like
man, I'm here for you.
You know everyone in like the world, you know.
But
no,
seriously, you have to do that. You have to have as much tenacity, about being determined to excel at your craft, really know your craft. But I've seen a lot of really, really great people, incredibly skilled, and like far more mightier than me in terms of like actual capability and capacity, who are timid and shy and reticent, and you don't have to change your personality to do any of this stuff we're talking about. You don't have to be a sanguine like socialite like myself, but at the same time you do have to assert yourself, and I think that everything everybody here is saying, everybody's been deliberate about. Our stories are all different. It's very interesting to hear how we're contrasting and comparing, but the reality is there's one thread, and that is assertion. A determination to not give up, to not stop, to not say no.
And kiss goodbye to sleep.
Sleep, entertainment.
Yep. Social life.
People.
I told you about my beginning. That literally 1 hour sleep. I mean, I didn't sleep for 3 years.
Well, I think we all did.
Literally. It's amazing I'm alive.
And when I after Guernsey, I moved to London. I got an opportunity to work at Island Records back in the days when they had the Fallout Shelter studios, and they had a studio opposite as well, so it was like a demo studio as well. But I made a lot of records in there as well. So I was just the studio engineer. It was kind of the opposite of your Psalm experience, where Trevor Wyatt, who ran the studios down there, within 2 weeks I was doing a remix. He said, "Can you do remix?" I was like, "Yeah," because I'd done lots of remixes in my studio in Guernsey, and I was like, "Yeah." He said, "Right, here's the master tape, go and do it." So. And what reminded me of is that I worked with a guy called Groucho, who did a lot of work. Great
Fallout Shelter for years.
He made a lot of Grace Jones records, and he was legendary, bringing in his own sound system and mix. I mean, he was incredible. But I didn't sleep one session. I think it was 3 days I hadn't slept, and he was still going. And I watched him doing a ride on the SSL on the vocal, fall asleep halfway through, and then wake up and finish the ride. I was like, this guy. I mean, this is just like. So I had to ask him to go home.
84 hours is my record. Still mixing.
It's not a competition, but well done.
It wasn't just me.
84
it was a team of us.
I like it was down to the 84.
Week in, week out.
As you put your head on the...
Well, because it became so stupid that we started counting, foolishly.
But also that's stopped now, I'm glad to say.
Yeah, I mean, thank God technology has changed that.
I think COVID stopped it. We all went home and actually looked back at our careers and thought, what are we doing? It's crazy hours. I mean, at Psalm, as an assistant, doing an 130-hour week and do the maths was not hugely uncommon. Yeah. And that now would just be... the assistants now would say no. They're far more empowered as young people coming in. Going back to the thing about how we get people in and that characteristic side of it, you almost expect they're going to have a technical knowledge and they know their music and they know their gear. So much is put on that character side. So for all the people who do an intern week when I used to be in a studio with Flood and Alan Moulder, two big producers, there'd be a week where an intern would come in and they just didn't know what they were being assessed for. It'd always be about they wanted to do the studio stuff and do this. And a few would even complain, look, well, I'm not in the studio. They've been on reception or they cleaned out the fridge in the kitchen.
Yeah, I'm making some tea.
We'd come back and they'd be on the sofa lying down as we're trying to get in. It'd be like... but the kids who just kept knocking on the door, do you want tea? Do you want tea? Go downstairs, the place would be immaculate. People would say, oh, that's a nice kid you got on reception. Everyone would then be fighting over having this kid as their assistant because, they could exist in the long hours. And it was the same at Strong Room. A lot of people would come in. One person actually had a bit of a shouting match with the studio manager saying, I didn't come here to do reception. I came here to be an engineer and a producer. And so, yeah, well, that was...
How did that turn out?
I think it ended there. But... It was knowing that and knowing that, as I say, what you're supposed to be doing. But all the people who did so much outside of the expected were the ones where you thought, oh, they're excellent.
Well, there's obviously the famous flood story, right?
Yeah, flood and drought.
Flood and drought, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Does anyone know that story? Okay, so there were, Flood was the assistant at the studio. There were two people. Flood's obviously not his name. It's a nickname that was attached to him. So there was Mark and another guy. And... Flood made constant amounts of tea. Constant. Tea. Drought made no tea. Okay?
And one of them...
Flood became the best producer in the world. you've never heard of drought. You know, so
I believe that right there sums up our entire panel, doesn't it?
Genuinely, you know, as far as I know, that's the folklore. I mean, you know, I'm not sure how embellished it is. I'm sure Flood will tell you himself, but it is true, right? Yeah. And you know, I was always told in the studio, make yourself indispensable. Make the session, make you so much part of the session that when you're not there, they notice that you're not there. You know, because that way they'll ask you to come back. And sometimes different sessions have different requirements. Sometimes they just want you to make tea. Sometimes they want you to be alert and know what's going on in the studio. And that character thing and that understanding of your environment is so important. You know, especially when you're starting. You want to be able to draw attention to yourself. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was at Conk, I'd only been there 2 or 3 months. And when I walked in the studio, I thought, yeah, this is the studio for me. I've made it. I was on one session, and I spent most of the time upstairs in reception talking to the ladies. And the engineer and the producer kept coming out going, Kevin? And at the end of the day, he pulled me aside and he said, look, Kevin, you can be really good, but tomorrow, if you're not here in the studio with me, and I turn around and say, Kevin, can you? And you don't go, it's already done, you won't be coming back the day after. And I went home and thought, yeah, it was like a serious wake-up call.
They are the good assistants, the ones who are listening to the conversation in the room the whole time. And the conversation, they're already charged out, start setting something else. But then you go, actually, no, we won't do that now. And they don't make it, they just go and put it back down again.
No big deal.
But they've just been ahead of the game, and it makes such a difference to your working day. It's the stops and starts that are the bump to creativity a lot of the time for me. The more seamless it is a working day, the better the sessions.
And everybody's as important in that. Everybody of the team, not only the assistant, but the producer, the art, everybody. It's got to feel like it's flowing. You don't want to feel like you're stopping running. You know?
Yeah, no one wants to wait 30 minutes while you warm up a valve microphone. Because 40 minutes ago, they spoke about using that microphone.
And getting an idea down. Yeah, exactly.
You know, you don't want to stop that creativity. So a lot of young people who go into studios, they think that the role of the assistant is a nothing role. It's far from that. A good assistant, as we've all said, can actually make a record, a good record.
You've also got a huge amount of responsibility. That was the double-edged thing about, as an assistant, you can destroy a session very easily, you know, with drives, in those days, tapes, your ability to wipe something, you're so tired trying to keep on top of it. But at the same time, there was no balance to that with regards to your remuneration in any way whatsoever.
Yeah.
So one minute you're getting shouted at because the tea's not got sugar in or got sugar in, but the next minute you also got responsibility for tens of thousands of pounds worth of recording.
I think I heard somebody at Island Records wiped over I think it was Eric Clapton guitar solo or something.
Oh, no, yeah, we've all got those.
I think that might have been drought.
We've all got drought. Yeah. Just to come back to my story, so I'm just going to finish it off. So the next day, literally, I was right there, everywhere. And at the end of the evening, he said, "Kevin, that's what you need to do for the rest of your life in the music business." You know, and it was a harsh lesson. And you know what? I can't lie. I was really upset when I went home. But tenacity, determination. Don't take things too personally. A lot of people might shout at you, maybe not now so much, but you know what? Back in the day, people would get upset with you, you know, and then you just got to brush past that. And that's as engineers as much as assistants or producers, you know. So having that sort of determination and
always being ready.
Always being ready.
Always
a
being
very
ready.
good way of saying
And
it.
that's the same for a producer, I think, as well.
Yeah.
I mean, on the other end of the scale, I try and never let, like we were saying, don't let it ever stop. If you're kind of floundering around on an idea or writing a song and it's not really going anywhere, start something else. Or, you know, I'm always aware, and I learned a lot off Youth, actually. I used to work with a producer called Youth. And he would say, I'm never going to let the band's feet touch the ground. That's how he put it. And I think that's a real valuable lesson.
Because with assistants saying, but if there's a technical issue, it's between you and me.
Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't have to come into the room.
Don't let it come into the room. Exactly.
Know.
Keep it moving.
It's like the great technical people.
Hand them a guitar to get a new idea, or, you know, keep it moving. Literally, if you're sitting around playing with a hi-hat for half an hour. It's just like, what, you know.
The other thing is that some people don't know how to regain traction when they've been through a mundane few hours, right? And so many bands particularly, bands that come to me, there's a lot of people who come and they are like, wait, maybe if we just do it like a couple, 3 takes through and just get the hottest, most vibiest one. And then yet these same people are all talking about, like, they're all cinema fans and movie fans and everything. I'm like, do you know how movies are made? It's stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. Camera here, camera there, camera there, camera. You know, it's like it's not a live performance. It involves a live performance, but it's Lego building. It's blocks. It's Tetris.
Let me just. I realise that it's already 5:15.
Wow.
What time have we got? What time have we got till, Matt? Whenever. Okay, great.
We've got the rest of our lives to talk about. It's going to take a while.
Sorry.
We've got the rest of our lives to talk
They're not
about.
throwing stones or booing us.
You guys can't go nowhere for a while.
Make this a marathon. Let's just keep going.
Yeah. See how long they last.
Yeah.
We're here to really talk about how to get into the business and what to do when you're in there. So, you guys have found your positions, found your places, or multiple places. What's happened after that? Let me hear how you've got to here today.
I'll be quick.
Yeah, please.
Well, I mean, it's
for everyone.
I think as an arc of my career, I think determination has come into it a lot.
Yeah.
I think that, and within a track as well. I want to get this. If I'm going to write a song, I want to get this sounding good by the end of the day. Otherwise, if it's not working, move on or do something else. So I think just where I am today, I think it's collaboration, looking for artists, like you said, being social, getting out there, meeting people. I've met these great people. I've got other people here, artists reaching out. I still reach out on Instagram and find somebody who I like who might not even be signed, but I'm like, this person's really good.
The music industry's changed a lot.
Well, that's what I was trying to. Yeah, it's like me staying. This might not be the same as somebody else.
How we had careers
back
15 years ago to how you have a career of longevity.
Yeah.
How has that changed, and what have you had to do?
I think collaboration is always the key. I've been lucky enough along the way to have some significant bands and artists who have done really well when I've worked with them, and that obviously brings in the future work, and people still refer something. It's like being a band. You only need one hit. There's bands who are still playing something that they wrote 30 years ago. Doesn't matter, they can go and do huge gigs because people want to hear that song and see them live and they love them. So I think it's the same being a producer or an engineer. You've got to still be relevant, of course, and I think you will be by working with new artists and bands all the time. But I think it's you just got to work with as many people as you can. I think I make a lot of records, and it's like having loads of horses in the same race, and all it takes is one to take off.
How do you motivate yourself continuously when you're not having those hits, when you're not having that work?
Determination and wanting to make great records. It doesn't matter. I don't think of after it leaves the studio. I just think when we're in that moment, I want to make this sound as good as it possibly can in not too long.
And not worry too much about after or before.
I'm making it for me and the artist in that room, and if we love it,
that's it.
Can I jump in on that?
Please.
Yeah, of course.
I've had a completely different career than I ever thought that I was going to have, I mean, I've had some great successes, but they've been thin on the ground at points where I thought they wouldn't be, and they've been accentuated where I was like, wait, what, that? So you're not in control of the results, All you can control is the output. And what you do, and this is exactly the same for anybody who's in a bed sit with a laptop. Same, what's coming out of the speakers in the end, right? That combined with integrate, be open, learn from other people. Look, I can't believe I'm on the stage with some of these dudes. I've been listening to this guy for your head's going to be like this big when you're done, right? I love this guy. Tim too. Shelby, I've known these people for a while, thankfully, but it's amazing to have arrived in this position because there's been points where I've had no idea if I would, right? I was driving a long trip and I heard a record called Felt Mountain by Goldfrapp, and that man right there is responsible for it. So the fact that I'm here, not giving up. It's getting back to the tenacity thing. That's the reason I'm saying all that, you know.
Yeah,
I'm still as excited going into work in the morning as I was 40 years ago. And I think if you lose that or lose an interest, it's evolved so much over the years. There's so much to keep you constantly having to learn, music aside, just keeping up with the gear and how that's progressed and what it enables us to do and how it lets you play differently with things. But when I've had contemporaries kind of moaning a bit about the way it is, it's like, well, stop it. You know, I'm actually really enjoying it, so I'm not part of that argument. You don't have to do it. You're not sentenced to being a producer. At the start as well, I wanted to be an engineer, so that's my thing. I didn't even know about producers. I just wanted to be a really good engineer and work my way up. I realised that producers drove better cars than engineers, so I figured there should be something maybe I need to learn about production. And then eventually get drawn into it, and as a producer for the last 25 years, it's keeping that interest up. You know, if you're not excited, don't do it.
Shelby, you said something there that's quite relevant.
We're all nerds. That's why we're passionate about this. You know, like if we at the end of the day still get to go into the studio and work with amazing artists and play with all of this amazing tech, all of this gear, at the end of the day, that's what we love doing. You know, and the fact that there is the possibility of making money off the back of that is a massive bonus and a massive privilege.
Yeah,
I didn't even realise you could when I came in.
Yeah.
Someone once said to me, can you make a lot of money like being in a studio engineer? I said, if you want to make a lot of money, go and work in the city. If you want to make great records, become a studio person, you know?
I became at ease with it when I realized that I didn't want fame, I didn't want riches. I'll welcome any of them, but I wanted transcendence.
Yeah, and look,
I wanted experience. I wanted playback transcendence. My God, that's it.
Yeah,
right?
And look, you know, that's easy to say when you've had very successful careers, but we know that when you're starting out, it's hard. It's hard to command that decent salary, that decent daily rate, that decent work, even. You know, but I think, as Julian and Danton and everybody else has said, the tenacity to keep going, this is what separates the good from the great. I really appreciate everyone taking their time to sit with us for the last hour or so, but really I want you to thank Julian Kindred, Shelby Logan Warren, Danton Supple, Tim Bran and myself, Kevin Paul. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening, and be sure to check out the show notes page for this episode, where you'll find further information along with web links and details of all our other episodes. And just before you go, let me point you to the Sound on Sound /podcasts website page, where you can explore what's playing on our other channels. This has been a MixBus production by me, Kevin Paul, for Sound on Sound.